pond swimming in blood. Pencil ribbons dancing in the rain. Flowers on the skyline. Hey, how is the wine? What comes round's going round again. Towers coming up for air.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael and Sam Tuesday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Sam's basically brand new conversation with Corey Robin about the Republican grift, Republican scam artistry, and where we are today. More Republican judges confirmed the Trump nomination process moving forward fast. More judges, almost I think twice the amount of judges for circuit courts confirmed at this point in his term as compared to President Obama. Puerto Rico facing ongoing devastation, even as the Jones Act is no longer waived. The Iraqi national government moving against the Kurds, retaking Kirkuk. Does this mean that the northern Iraqi Kurds and the Syrian and Turkish Kurds are going to set aside their policy differences and reignite with their shared Kurdish nationalism, even as the world expresses its ongoing support for the Iran deal? Macron flying to Iran as Haley stumbles on TV. Popovich calls out Trump, and Trump wants everybody to know that unlike Obama, he does actually acknowledge the deaths of soldiers. Trump having to withdraw his nomination for head of the DEA. Why? Well, his previous background as head of the Zetas caused some controversy. No, I'm just kidding. But his previous background as one of the main bagmen for the pharma industry in Congress, who was pretty active in at least setting up some of the policy that allowed for the opioid crisis, and his relationship with one of his aides who's a top lobbyist for that industry didn't exactly help. All that, plus Syrian militias taking back Raqqa from ISIL, all that and much, much more on today's Majority Report. How's everybody doing?
I'm well.
Matt is well. Jamie, how are you?
I'm well as well.
It's good to see everybody. Patrick off mic. Brendan. He got a thumbs up. That doesn't even goad you. What's your middle name?
It's my mother's maiden name.
Which is?
Not giving out.
He's not giving out his middle name. Okay, got it. It's his mother's maiden name, so I'll just make one up in the fun half. Let's get to this sound. Apparently, recently, and I have a couple of U.S. Special Forces were killed in Chad. The Chadian government has actually recently announced that they're no longer going to be coordinating in the fight against Boko Haram because of their implication of President Trump's immigration and visitation policies with regards to Chad. So they've reacted to it. I think if you asked Trump if King Jaffe Joffer was the president of Chad, he might not know what you were talking about, but that's just because he hasn't seen Coming to America, not because he knows Chad is actually a country. And apparently President Trump was late in sending or kind of publicly acknowledging the loss of these soldiers' lives. And he responded to a question about this during a press conference with Mitch McConnell in a manner that you would probably expect at this point for him to take.
Why haven't we heard anything from you so far about the soldiers that were killed in Niger, and what do you have to say about that?
I've written them personal letters. They've been sent or they're going out tonight, but they were written during the weekend. I will, at some point during the period of time, call the parents and the families, because I have done that traditionally. I felt very, very badly about that. I always feel badly. It's the toughest calls I have to make are the calls where this happens. Soldiers are killed. It's a very difficult thing. Now, it gets to a point where, you make 4 or 5 of them in one day. Is a very, very tough day. For me, that's by far the toughest. So the traditional way, if you look at President Obama and other presidents, most of them didn't make calls. A lot of them didn't make calls. I like to call when it's appropriate, when I think I'm able to do it. They have made the ultimate sacrifice. So generally, I would say that I like to call. I'm going to be calling them. I want a little time to pass. I'm going to be calling them. I have, as you know, since I've been president, I have. But in addition, I actually wrote letters individually to the soldiers we're talking about, and they're going to be going out either today or tomorrow. Yes.
It made total sense. First, I would just a brief correction. The soldiers were 4 special services officers were killed in Niger. President Obama, of course, did call the families of fallen soldiers, and but it did get us thinking, I guess to be fair to Trump, that those calls might have been hard for President Obama because he had to pretend that he was upset about the deaths of Yakubian white devils in the course of imperialist fighting. Hello, Mrs. Smith. Sorry your kid died. Look, I got a Kendrick Lamar meeting at 2, so I'm going to need to wrap this up. Allahu Akbar. Trump, somebody tweeted this the other night that Trump really is I think that the frame for Republicans generally that everything is just about tearing down Obama's legacy is not the right way to read it because there's a broader policy set in play that transcends Obama. But I think with Trump specifically, he's basically a stalker. That's like the only way to describe his relationship with President Obama. You guys spend a third of your life in your sheets. Are they taking care of you the way they should be? Introducing brooklinen.com. High-quality sheets and bedding at a price that won't keep you up at night. Founded in April 2014. Brooklinen offers simple, beautiful home essentials without the luxury price. It's wow, Jamie's super excited. She's rushing to get on the site right now. It's the fastest growing bedding brand in the world because people love these products. Their sheets have over 12,000 5-star reviews. That is a lot. Plus, they have versatile colors and patterns that complement any decor. This is luxury bedding, underpriced. You have to try these sheets today. Sam is constantly raving about his Brooklinen sheets. I know as soon as I switch my sheet game up, which I'm actually going to have to do soon, I will be definitely on the Brooklinen bandwagon. And it's not just Sam. I've actually asked some other people about them. And this is something like I'm embarrassed I'm late to. I'm like the opposite of Matt and his early adoption of things like this. Try these sheets, I know that you will love them as well. Brooklinen has an exclusive offer for my listeners. Get 20% off. Get $20 off, rather, and free shipping when you use promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. In fact, Brooklinen is so confident that you'll love your new sheets that they offer a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty on all their sheets and comforters. There's no reason not to give these sheets a try. The only way to get $20 off and free shipping is to use promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLYNEN.com. Brooklinen.com. Promo code majority. Brooklinen. These are the best sheets ever. Did you guys get a chance? I think we had the Nature Box snacks before the new members of our militia came on board. Matt, do you remember the Nature Box snacks?
Yeah, I had mine. I can't remember what I had, but it was banana flavored and really good.
I had some of the banana flavored one, and then there was like an Asian one, like a kind of like some type of like, I forget the name. Anyways, we had Nature Box in here for probably about an hour, and then we just mashed all of them. Primarily Sam. Sam was like a vulture. He's like, fueled his energy to read a Social Security actuarial table. But they were delicious. When it comes to snacks, sometimes it feels like the only options are delicious and a billion calories or boring and tasteless. But it doesn't have to be that way. Up your snack game with Nature Box. Nature Box has over 100 snacks that taste good and are all made from high-quality, simple ingredients. That means no artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners, Matt, so that you can feel good about what you're eating. Oh, right. There was the honey Dijon pretzels. Those were the ones that I really liked. And there's vanilla bean wafers. The honey Dijon pretzels were perfect for me. That's like exactly. And what I liked about the vanilla bean wafers was that they weren't too sweet. I'm like not a huge sweets guy, so I was surprised that I liked them. They satisfy, they did. In fact, it's true. They satisfy my sweet tooth without making me feel guilty. Plus, they add new snacks inspired by real customer feedback, the latest food trends, and professional chefs every month. It's so simple. Just go to naturebox.com. Choose the snacks you want, and NatureBox will deliver them right to your door. There's no risk. If you ever try a snack you don't like, NatureBox will replace it for free.
A Nature Box snack, not just like any snack.
Yeah, you can't just send them some nonsense snack.
I had the Snickers bar. It was unsatisfying, and I have some Nature Box.
And of course it will be, because it's not Nature Box. It's all going to be unsatisfying. They only mean Nature Box snacks. Exactly. Very lawyerly of you, Matt. I appreciate that. So you're sure to find your new snack obsession. And right now you'll save more. NatureBox is offering our listeners 50% off of your first order when you go to naturebox.com/majority. That's naturebox.com/majority for 50% off of your first order. That's insane. naturebox.com/majority. Tonight, 7 p.m., Michael Brooks Show. We're live. We're talking about Catalonia, the EU, and socialism. Mike Hanna from Al Jazeera, the UN correspondent, is going to break down the Iran fallout, what's happening in Kurdistan. Right-wing Mandela is hanging out with Gorka. We have some newfound audio. I'm talking about the bigger strategic push behind Medicare and for all, and why we need it, why it isn't just a moral issue, it's a strategic one, and some actually some more follow-up on those Barack Obama calls to fallen soldiers. They're actually really disturbing, and I don't know if revealing them to the public is a good idea, but I think we have a journalistic obligation to do so. All that, 7 p.m. live tonight. Check it out. Thanks, everybody, for great feedback on that show. We'll be right back with Sam's interview with Corey Robin, and then we'll all see you in the fun half.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Corey Robin. He is a professor of politics at Brooklyn College and author of The Reactionary Mind, Conservatism from Edmund Burke to Donald Trump. And this is the second edition. I think we had you on for the first edition, and you have updated it with an assessment of our most recent president, as he is, I guess, addressing the question of his conservative bona fides.
Yes, that's right. I wouldn't say most recent president. He's the current president, unfortunately.
Yes, it's true. He's both the most recent and the current, I guess. I'm already imagining a different day, but all right. Well, let's go into this, because this is, I mean, and you're approaching this from from I guess a philosophical and ideological perspective, because I mean what's interesting, and I guess maybe we'll circle back around to this, is to the relationship between Donald Trump and Republicans. But let's get there after we talk about his relationship to conservatism. You start off, at least in the piece that I've read of yours, talking about the question of Donald Trump's ability, as you read The Art of the Deal, his ability to jump, to contradict himself within almost a span of just a few sentences.
Yeah, so it was a really weird experience. Earlier this year, I think it was around January, February, I started reading The Art of the Deal. I felt like it was time to kind of figure out who this guy was and what he was about. And then let me preface this by saying there was a big article in the New Yorker, I think that Jane Mayer wrote, where she interviewed Tony Schwartz, who was the ghostwriter of The Art of the Deal. Donald Trump didn't write it. The ghostwriter did. And the ghostwriter, Tony Schwartz, said he felt really bad about the book because he felt like it had really given this image of Trump that was really positive, that it had burnished his reputation. And so I was expecting to read, this kind of triumphalist statement. But if you actually read it, and I wouldn't even say pretty carefully, if you just read it, it reveals just what a horror show this guy is in all sorts of ways. So to get back to your question, and so that's why I take the book seriously, and I think it's actually a good statement of Trump and Trumpism. So all throughout the book, he makes claims, and as you said, literally like on the next page, sometimes even the next paragraph, he contradicts himself. And sometimes it's comical. So he makes a big deal in his opening chapter about he just doesn't do lunch, lunch is for wimps kind of a thing. And then I counted the number of times by the time, and I stopped, but I think by page 100, he's already gone out to lunch 3 times. And it struck me as very funny, just the kind of the bravado by which he says things. And then, and then the casualness with which he then admits that the opposite is the truth. And this isn't just a kind of a personal thing or a foible of Trump. I think it's important to step back now, and because people will point to these contradictions, and they always have, and they say, aha, he's inconsistent, he lies, he says X, then he does Y, and all that. But what people don't realize is this is actually a very old trope on the right, going way back to the reaction against the French Revolution. And the reason why it is such an old trope is that the French Revolution, one of the promises of the French Revolution was that it was going to reorganize society in a rational, reasonable, just way. The metric system, all these kinds of things that they introduced into society to make it more orderly. They reorganized the regions and new departments. They declared the year 1. They did all these things, a new kind of a calendar that was supposed to be more rational. And conservatives reacted in horror against this because they felt like the essence of life and the essence of society is not rationality, but irrationality, that contradiction and inconsistency and paradox are what it means to be human. And it's what also, particularly in a society that's unequal, that's hierarchical, like a monarchy, right, where there's domination and subjection, you couldn't have reason and consistency be the rule, because the whole point is that people are different and society is organized hierarchically, so you have to have different rules for different people. So inconsistency and contradiction and paradox have really been very important to the conservative tradition from the very beginning.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue. I mean, the utility was this is the way. This way, we don't have to justify why we might have access to more resources or control of people, because that's the life. I mean, that's the utility there.
Right. And so I don't want to make, Trump is not a reader of conservative philosophy. He's not steeped in Edmund Burke or anything like that, so I'm not making that claim. But the way in which he kind of, says one thing and then, with a nudge and a wink says another, is something that you see in the conservative tradition, throughout. George W. Bush, people forget this, even though he wasn't so long ago. The thing that conservatives loved about George W. Bush was, as Fred Barnes put it in his book, that he was the rebel in chief. Right. He was like a James Dean sort of character, they thought. I'm not saying he was, right? Who could thumb his nose at all those fancy Ivy League professors with all their rules and their political correctness and all their strictures about how everything should be done in a certain kind of a way. And George W. Bush didn't give a crap. That's what made him authentic. That's what made him a real, populist. If you read Peggy Noonan on Ronald Reagan, it was the same kind of a thing. So what I said, in the book is that, Trump has the confidence of his contradictions. And that, because it shows that he's just not a stuffed shirt. It shows that he's not a suit, and that's important to his appeal.
All right, so because and we should make that clear, right? I mean, like you say, he's not adopting he's not reading deep into conservative thought and adopting anything. It's just a question of why he pops with this ideology, and and I believe that there's also, and where does this fit into it? That there was, I seem to recall a quote from Gertrude Himmelfarb saying something to the effect about the attacks on science were also of a similar utility, where there can be no objective reality because you don't want anybody to be making those type of arguments, where you need to have the ability to say well, that's your set of facts and this is ours, and this is why things are.
I don't know the specific Gertrude Himmelfarb quote that you're referring to, but again, conservatives, going way back, have always been very leery of science, and it's not because they're anti-intellectual. I mean, what's fascinating is the strongest attacks on science on the right, or on science as a kind of organizing principle, the reality principle, you might say, the strongest attacks on that have always come from intellectuals, from very serious thinkers. And there have been a multiple set of reasons, but I think for our purposes, maybe the most important one most recently, was the famous Karl Rove quote that he said to the guy at Esquire.
Susskind, right.
Yeah, to Susskind, where he said, you people are in the reality-based community. And by you people, he meant journalists, academics, the media, commentary, intellectuals. And you guys go about and describe that reality. But we are, we being the Bush administration, we create reality. We are not slaves to reality. We don't hew to reality. We transform it. And once we are successful, you, intellectuals, journalists, and all the rest of it, will then describe our reality as if that were just the way of things. But what you don't know is we created that reality. And so conservatism has this very strong activist component that makes it very skeptical of the constraints of science. And there's a lot of other reasons why it has been critical of science, but I think that's a really important one that we have to acknowledge. And that, again, it's not that these are buffoons and idiots. It's that they understand in a certain way that that science is a knowledge of constraint. It's a knowledge of things as they are. And what conservatism has always been in the business of is things as they might be.
And why is that? I mean, why as they might be? Is it aspirational? I mean, why is that? I mean, I can understand why they would attack science, because it's constraining and it is, in some ways, it's equalizing, right? I mean, two different.
The rules apply to everybody.
The rules apply to everybody. I can understand why they would be against it, but what is it about? Is it because they have some type of aspirational spirit, or is it just that as they could be, keeps people sort of like in the game? Is it like I'm a dog going around the track and there's the rabbit in front of me?
So I think there's a couple of reasons, but the first one I want to stress is the one you've just emphasized, which is that science, in seeking to describe sort of general rules that apply, oftentimes presumes a universal human nature. It doesn't always, but it often does. And there's been a very strong element within conservatism that has resisted that has said, no, there is no such thing as that insofar as we have a human nature, it's that we are all created unequal. And that inequality is sown into the human condition. So to try to come up with a set of universal rules that would apply to everybody, not just in terms of biology and physicality, but then morally and politically, is, from the point of view of many conservatives, a disaster. So I think that's one part of it. But the second part of it is that there is at the heart of conservatism a vision. This is a kind of a political or a moral vision, that of the best man, it's often men, although it doesn't need to be, and that these are kind of what Keynes called animal spirits. These are people who are aristocratic in nature, who are able to dominate society. They don't bend their knee to society. They don't bend their will they impose their will upon society, and that this is not only good for them, this is also good for the rest of us. So I think that's a very strong element to that, is that they have this vision of the noble man who would not be so pedestrian as to have to concede to the reality of things as they are. So I think that's the second one. But then there's a third, and this is much, much more political and central to the argument of my book, which is that conservatism is a reactionary philosophy. And what it has always been reacting against are democratic, insurgent, emancipatory movements from below, particularly when those movements succeed. So the French Revolution, the emancipation of slaves, the New Deal, the Civil Rights Movement. These movements that transformed and made the world into a more equal place, a place where more people could enjoy freedom. Conservatism is a project that seeks to undo that and undo it in real time. So the last thing that a conservative wants to be told is this is just reality. Reality is, African Americans are equal to white people. That's reality. Women are equal to men. That's reality. Conservatives have postulated a politics against that kind of dispensation. They have tried to undo these reforms. And if you have a kind of quietistic philosophy of accommodating reality, you can't undo things. This is why conservatism has always hated, this is getting ahead of ourselves, what they call the establishment. It's very interesting if you read Barry Goldwater's The Conscience of a Conservative, which came out in 1960, another ghost-written book, by the way. The first page is an attack. This is Mr. Conservative, right? It's attack not on liberalism, not on the Democratic Party, not on the welfare state, not on the New Deal. It's an attack on the Republican establishment. Why? Because the Republican establishment has conceded to reality. It has adapted it to reality. And what the conservative wants to do is to transform reality.
Okay, so let's put a pin in that and return that, because I want to just go back to that sort of notion of, so you have one part of that is that the desire, and I guess seeing themselves on some level, and the desire or the utility in wanting there to be an Ubermensch who has different rules, I guess, applied to them. But at the same time, you're saying that also it allows for them to see upstarts, people maybe participating in some type of emancipatory movement and saying, no, this is, this, we don't have to accept this. They can return back into that place because there is no fundamental objective truth or reality that says that they should be equal in some fashion.
Right. What's interesting, though, in all of this, which I also stress in the book, is, and I think you sort of hinted at this, is that as much as they have contempt, conservatives, for these upstart insurgent groups, they oftentimes express a kind of envy of them because they see that what these groups have is a kind of energy, particularly when they're successful. And an energy and a vision to impose their will. And so there's a weird synergy that happens in conservatism whereby they, as much as they are expressing hostility to the left and to these emancipatory movements, they're also learning from those movements. They're also adapting to those movements and incorporating different themes. And so you see that process happen as well.
Well, give me an example of that, because I mean, the only thing I can imagine is like as you're saying that, is just my experience of conservatives who, I used to work with Janine Garofalo, and I used to just watch like how conservatives just like both hated her and desperately wanted to be sort of seen as being like cool, like literally wanting to be cool. And only thing that keeps coming into my mind is that that free market Fonzie guy, I can't remember his name, from Reason Magazine, who wears the leather coat, and the constant attempts of the right to say like we're the new counterculture, and it seems to last for like 6 months, and then it just sort of goes away for like 3 years, and they do it again. Is it the first time they've come to it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the word counterculture. There's a great article by a historian named Bethany Moreton in an anthology of essays called Rightward Bound, where she talks about how the business class in the 1970s created a counterculture around the free market. And they used to do things on campuses. They'd organize campus groups, and they'd have a battle of the bands. I mean, it sounds so dorky and ridiculous on the one hand, but they would have businessmen go and try to show that that we're hip and we're cool. I mean, in some ways, Mad Men is a little bit about that in its second phase, about how the sort of the Madison Avenue types kind of adapt to and incorporate the counterculture. But that's exactly what they did, was to try to create and profit from and use the counterculture, not just to sell products, but to sell capitalism as well. And so they did that. But again, not to get too fussy and antiquarian, this goes right back to Edmund Burke. So there he is, polemicizing against the French Revolution with every fiber of his being. He loathes it. But what he says throughout various texts is the revolutionaries, and then he starts talking about the Jacobins, are superiors in their talent and in their vision. And he says, if we are going to mount a force against this, our force has to at least approximate in some ways what they are doing. And what you could say, what conservatism has always been since that moment, is an attempt to try and do that, to try and approximate the force of the left. And so that's what makes conservatism such a dynamic force, is that it's not just defending these established hierarchies in a kind of fussy, who's that character from Gilligan's Island, the wealthy...
the millionaire, Mr. Howell?
Yeah, Mr. They're not Thurston Howell, Thurston Howell III or whatever his name was. They are instead trying to show exactly what you're talking about, that they are hip, that they have talent, that they are culturally adept in all these different sorts of ways. And again, this is where we come back to Trump and why he's so important. And you see this in The Art of the Deal. He makes such a big deal about the fact that he doesn't carry a briefcase, that he doesn't have a schedule. He just goes to work and he just kind of sees what happens. And it's very clear that he thinks that that's important to not just his success as a businessman, but to his brand. That's what people gravitate to in him. And I think at some level he's not wrong. It's very telling in the Republican primary. Ted Cruz gets set up as, the kind of the Boy Scout. and Rubio gets set up as, the guy who, is trying, will do whatever he needs, the brown noser. Trump's appeal is that he breaks the rules. He's the bad boy.
I mean,
that's very critical.
Okay, so all right, but there's a lot of different themes that go into Trump, and I want to just circle back to on this, the going back to the point about the attacks on science and reality are not anti-intellectual, but it seems like there's been a strain of anti-intellectualism that grows, and I think you talk about this in the book, and that's the populism, that it's sort of like there's a anti-intellectual streak, it seems to me. On some level, Trump embodies that, as did George W. Bush to a large extent, it seems to me. Is that a relatively new phenomenon, or is that just another way of basically throwing off the establishment?
It's definitely a way of throwing off the establishment. It's also very old. I mean, Burke and Joseph de Maistre, who I also talk about, who's another reactionary against the French Revolution, they go after the Enlightenment philosophes. That's a word that recurs in Burke's attack on the revolution. This is a revolution of philosophers. My point was it's Burke and de Maistre, these guys, it's not as if these guys are hacks and hicks. Like, they're pretty smart intellectuals themselves. So it's this attack on reason and the life of the intellect oftentimes comes from people who are themselves intellectual. And that's been a very important, dimension of all this. But with regard to Trump, it's absolutely true that he makes the attack on intellectuals, and Bush did the same, a very big part, because, who are intellectuals? Who are academics? That's the politically correct police that is in alliance with the Democratic Party, with the feminists, and with the welfare state. And Trump did not invent this or pioneer this. You see this in Richard Nixon. You see this in Spiro Agnew, who's Nixon's... nabobs,
that guy.
Yeah, exactly, nattering nabobs of negativism. And you saw it in a lot of the Reagan administration. But ironically, while all that's going on, what they're also doing is creating a whole cohort of very smart intellectuals and apparatchiks who are taking over the courts, undoing the regulatory agencies, and all the rest of it. So there's always this kind of double movement that's happening, denouncing intellectuals, but also creating your own cadre of counter-intellectuals.
So Trump is up there on stage with all these other Republicans, and one thing he has going for him is that he doesn't abide by the rules. He's he's a counterculture figure. That politically incorrect and sort of rudeness of his plays into that. How much does the fact that he is supposedly a billionaire, let's stipulate that he is for the sake of this, like, how much does that, as he's on stage with the rest of them, it seems to me also had an important force, because he's the way that money is perceived, and I think you talk about how he sees money in The Art of the Deal. It's a score keep, right?
Yep.
And you got to wonder, like, what is it keeping score of? Like moral righteousness, just righteousness in some fashion, and that is very much, it seems to me, at the very least, a Republican, if not a conservative construct, because it always struck me is that there was nothing anybody was going to say to him on that stage where it would have more credibility than what he says, because he's richer.
Yeah. So this is a really important theme, and this is, I would say, probably the thing that I looked at very closely in Trump and his rise and the way he talks and so forth. There has, I don't want to get too deep into the history of this, there's been a long-running tension about money, about markets, and about capitalism on the right. I mean, the people always think that the right is just, automatically a free market, kind of a movement, and that actually historically is not the case. There are parts of the right that have been very critical, but there's also been a part of the right that has celebrated money in the market and capitalism, not because It's the most productive system, not because it's the most efficient system, not because it's a meritocratic system. Instead, the reason they've celebrated, and this is a big theme for Trump, is that it shows who is the strongest man, who is the greatest man. The man with the most money, the man who prevails in the market, is the man. He is the best man that way, and only the market will reveal who the best man is. Who is the one who's willing? And there's these crazy stories in The Art of the Deal, where he talks about he had this vision of building the biggest, the most beautiful, the most expensive atrium in the world or in the United States or something like that. And he put all of his money into it in Trump Tower in Manhattan. And everybody else, he said, wanted to copy it because it was so great. And then it becomes a kind of a moment of existential truth. Are they willing to pay the bill? And they're not. And at that moment, he says, the men are separated from the boys. Because he was willing to put his all and to make this great thing, and they're not. So what the market is almost a kind of an identity politics. It reveals who people are in the way that people used to talk about the battlefield. Let's say, you really reveal who's courageous and who's a coward by how they act on the battlefield. Right?
Is it like that? Because some level, right? That's merit, or is it like a dunk tank where we're going to determine if this person's a witch?
I'm not sure what you mean by the second part of what you meant. What do you mean
they determined if you were a witch back in the Salem trials. If you
by whether or not you drowned or something like that. Yeah, I think it's like that because it's not about merit. Like Obama believed in merit.
Right.
Like you work hard, the smartest person, the person who has the best product. Trump doesn't believe in any of that kind of crap. He thinks the person who wins in the market is kind of like the best. I don't know what the word is. Best con man. Because he understood like how to manipulate the most people, and he's very honest about this. He says, I engage in what I call truthful hyperbole, because the fact of the matter is we live in a fantasy world, and what people have is a fantasy of greatness. Most people are little small people, and I give them that fantasy. That's what I am. So I'm not giving them, I'm not Steve Jobs, giving them the best computer, or Bill Gates or Zuckerberg, designing this great, social media platform. I'm not like that. I'm giving them an experience. I'm giving them a show. It's a fantasy. And they're dupes and they're pathetic, but they buy it. And that's my secret. And so it's very different, I think, from how we normally think about merit in the market, because it's not, as I say, the best product, the best managerial system or anything like that. It's really, the best kind of, magic trick.
So from his perspective, he's going in and he's just pressing the certain buttons that he knows instinctually that, and I don't think he would say the conservative mind. I think he would just say people or a certain subset of people. And for those subset of people, they're just looking at, they buy into this notion of the market, just pops out, is really more of like a sieve. Like the quality will come out one way or another. And so if he's got the money, then he must be the champion. Exactly.
Money is the truth teller. It really reveals the truth. And, in a certain way, that guy, Robert Mercer, who's this sort of obscure billionaire who Jane Mayer profiled,
yes,
who's, connected with Bannon and all these people, he says, he's quoted in that piece that she did, saying, the value of a person is determined by how much money they have. So in many ways, Trump is playing to a very long-standing conservative Republican theme about the market. What's different, and what makes him different from someone like, say, Ayn Rand, is that they thought the market was entirely a truth teller, like that you really were the best person. Trump sometimes says that, and pushes that line, but he then takes it back and says basically, who's the biggest bullshit artist, and that's what I am. What the market really is, it's like a casino. He compares it, in fact, to a casino, right, where you're gambling at cards, and it's who can bluff the best. And the only difference between a casino and a market, he literally says this, is that in the stock market, on Nasdaq, they wear suits and carry briefcases. But there's no difference. And what's interesting about that comment, John Maynard Keynes, the great economist, made this very famous argument back in the 1920s. He said he was talking about war profiteering, and he said the problem with profiteers is it starts convincing ordinary people that all legitimate profit is just profiteering. It's all gambling. And the minute that happens, capitalism will have its support pulled out from beneath it, because you can't expect people to put up with inequality if they feel like the person at the top got there, by gambling and profiteering. Trump, in a way, comes exactly out of that. The only difference is that he recognized that wouldn't undermine capitalism at all. The result would be, once he told that kind of a truth, that people would flock to him because they would want to know his secret.
Well, it could undermine capitalism, right? I mean, ultimately, but he just knew that was almost like a hack in the system on some level.
Yeah, it could undermine capitalism. I mean, this gets into a much bigger question. If there's a real left there,
right,
that can then, expose that. The problem is, in the Democratic Party, Obama was very different. Obama famously said after the financial crisis,
turn the page.
He said, I know Jamie Dimon, I know Lloyd Blankfein. Those guys are smart, they're smart, talented men. Obama believed in the virtue and talent of the men of Wall Street. Trump doesn't. Trump doesn't at all. But because there's no real left, he gets away with saying this stuff that no conservative would. You'd have to go back to Teddy Roosevelt, frankly, to find any Republican president or successful candidate saying the kinds of things that Trump says about capitalism. It would have been a scandal. And it tells you something, I think, about the perilous state of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, that the person who's leading it now is so skeptical of the foundational myths upon which the party and the movement is built.
So, it's almost as if he's he's sort of, it's Penn and Teller may be unfortunate on some level in the context of politics to use as an example, but they're magicians up there, basically giving away the trick here, and he is on some level too, and getting rewarded for it. He's just not quite giving up his specific trick, but he's, right? Like he was out there saying in the campaign, look, I know how this works because I used to be part of it. Now I'm sort of like in the ether where I'm neither them or who I used to be. So I'm like the one guy who can float down, and I'm just the guy who's watching this transaction now, and I'm telling you about it. I'm neither the briber or the bribee at this point.
Now, the problem with all of this, so I've kind of given you, I think, what the shtick is and why it appeals, but I think there's a real problem there, which is that people elected him expecting the goods. And what those goods were we can argue about, and it's not entirely clear, but he hasn't delivered. And so we're now in this, I think, conservative movement and the Republican Party is in this very difficult situation because he's exposed them and their myths as being myths, right? But he hasn't necessarily put anything in its place, certainly not the things he promised to put in their place. So, he's sort of dancing on a wire, and his base gets smaller and smaller. So I think they're in a lot of trouble. because he pulled out some of their founding myths, and they don't necessarily have anything to replace it with.
I mean, is the base getting smaller and smaller?
Well, first of all, it definitely is. I mean, the polls are showing this now, that, white men without college degrees, white people in those Rust Belt states, in rural states. I mean, there was a massive poll that was just done. It was just released about 2 weeks ago, huge, probably the biggest one yet. And it showed that, in every single state, and in rural areas as well, he is losing support. And even more than that, the intensity of his, the people who had the most intense approval ratings, that's also going down. So, how this all plays out in elections, we have no idea. But the donor base is very nervous. You see article after article in the Wall Street Journal and in the Financial Times where they're now saying openly, if we don't get these tax cuts, it's over.
Ted Cruz said something to that effect the other day. Like it would be, but is there lasting damage to conservative ideology? Is Trump? I mean, one of the things, it's interesting because there's so many people who are using where Trump is being used as a tool, right? Like the Republicans are saying their calculation is as long as we're willing to risk all the possible downsides, including the small confrontation in North Korea, if we can get these tax cuts. Bannon, it seems to me, is less about fighting for Trump on the outside and more about using Trump for his fight on the outside. The Republicans, I mean, is this sticking? Is it sticking to? I mean, I can see how it's going to hurt them in the midterm, but is it sticking to the ideology?
I think it is. First of all, they can't even act on their ideology. I still don't think people on the left have fully grasped what a cataclysmic failure the Obamacare repeal, was for the right. Here they had total control over the government, and they could not act. They could not pull the trigger on something that, from the free market point of view, should have been a no-brainer. They could not bring themselves to do it. They tried, and they tried, and they tried. So I think right there you see that the ideology, I mean, just to give you a counterexample of what I'm talking about, in 1982, it was the worst recession since the Great Depression. Unemployment was almost at 11%. And Ronald Reagan goes on the radio, and what does he say? Does he say, we're going to pull back on the tax cuts, we're going to increase social spending to protect the safety net? Not a chance. He doubled down. He said, he talked about the magic of the market, and he said there's something. He said, I'm going to quote from that song, this could be the beginning of something big. I mean, that was the level of faith and confidence in the cause that they had. Now, here we come. They weren't able to do this massive thing on health care, and now we're in the tax cut question. And this, I apologize, it's going to sound a little bit wonky, but I think it's important to know the details. So George W. Bush did that massive tax cut. Remember, he did that massive tax cut when the Republicans did not control the Senate. He was able to pull that off. But there was a cap on it, which was the sunset provisions. They couldn't last past 10 years.
10 years because it couldn't meet the Byrd rule, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans have been furious about this ever since. They view this as a cataclysmic failure, right? Because Obama then got rid of all the big tax cuts at the top and so forth. When they got elected with total control of the government, they told themselves, we're not doing it that way again. We're going to do permanent, what they call tax reform, which means permanent tax cuts. That was the dream. And they had total control over the government, unlike George
literally Paul Ryan's dream. I think he bragged about being around a keg talking about this or something.
Right, and this is why they went after Obamacare first. That was part of the whole plan. I mean, they get attacked for this now because it was a failure, but it was part of a plan. They understood that, this is the holy grail, because if you make the tax cuts, if you defund, this is, what's his name, drowned in the bathtub. What's his name?
Norquist.
Norquist, right? You have to defund the state. That's the only way to do this. And they've been successful at that over the years. So now they have total control over the government. It's already very clear that they're not going to be able to do the long-term tax thing because it involves things like getting rid of the mortgage and the local and state deduction, and the Republicans in the northern states aren't going to go for that. The best they're looking at is to do a reprise of George W. Bush. That's the very best, and it may not be even possible because the way Corker is going in all of this. And again, remember, George W. Bush did not have total control over Congress.
Right.
They do. So I think you're just seeing, and then just one last example of the weakening of the ideology. They've passed 2 continuing resolutions since Trump has been in office. These are funding mechanisms to keep the government going for 3 or 4 months. And in each one, they had the opportunity to do all the things they wanted to do, whether it was to defund Planned Parenthood or, cut the State Department, all these things. And every single time, they didn't do it. I mean, we're getting to December, and we're finishing out the year with a budget that looks almost entirely like the one that Barack Obama would have passed. That's with a party in total control of the government. So again, I think you're seeing the weakening, the fraying of the ideology, and I'm going to be watching this tax debate very carefully because I think that's where you're going to it's in these actions that you see how the confidence of their convictions, if they have them or not.
I mean, is that though? I mean, because all right, and we should add too that Bush's tax cuts came, if I remember correctly, in the summer of 2001. Before 9/11. So just so that everybody knows that, because it's hard to forget that. I mean, it's easy to forget that he actually. I mean, he wasn't terribly popular either. I don't recall at that time. People have to remember the big taste in people's mouths. At least mine maybe was a little bit more rancid. Was that election? But do you think this is a function of? And what is this a function of? Is it a function of just they have overpromised? They had opportunities to cut Social Security. They could right now, if they had taken the deal from Barack Obama, following the fiscal cliff, they could have already cut some cost of living increases. Maybe they could get another cut. Are they suffering? It seems to me they're suffering either, and you tell me your opinion. They're either suffering from their rigidness or the multitude of opportunities they have for financing, which makes them all seemingly on the same page, but in fact working for different, Mercers, Koch brothers. There's a lot of different influences. Or is it Donald Trump? Because my theory about Donald Trump is that the only difference between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, let's say, on the Affordable Care Act, is that Manchin, Heitkamp, and maybe Donnelly are in play to jump over and vote with the Republicans, but they couldn't because of this Russia stuff on some level, that they had cover because he was in league with, a traditionally big American foe.
Right. So I think there's a lot of things are in play, but I want to just focus on 2. The first is, I think the kind of absence of a real left, I think, is very important. And here's why. There have always been factions, and very rigid ideological factions within the Republican Party. If anything, the Republican Party was far more divided ideologically back in 1981, let's say, than it is now. But what held those factions together and what enabled the party to kind of move forward was that there was a very clear enemy, which was the New Deal and the welfare state. And it had to be destroyed. And that enemy has a disciplining effect on you, as any sort of soldier will tell you. It forces a kind of solidarity, a unity on you, and it also forces you to think smarter and sharper and to make the arguments better. And that's the way the conservative movement developed. This goes way back to the 60s, in fact, when there was this whole movement for what was called fusion. How do you bring together these free marketeers with these social conservatives, with these hardcore anti-communists who want to build up the military? All these crazy factions, but they were able to do it because, and it culminates in Ronald Reagan. We have this enemy this common enemy, all of us. We may have different priorities, but our enemy is the same. What happens when that enemy disappears? There's a scramble that sets in, and every faction says, I want more. So then you have a kind of rigidification of these factions that sets in, and the suppleness disappears. And I think that has really had a huge effect. I mean, the way the Freedom Caucus totally screwed the negotiations over Obamacare throughout those first couple of months, they were going for broke.
Right.
And you can see why they were. They said, for God's sakes, we've got total control of the government. We've been saying we believe this. Do we believe this or don't we believe this? You all voted for it. So you could see exactly why they pushed so hard. But then all of a sudden, you got the other side pulling back. And, I think that has the lack of a left. And when I say the lack of a left, I don't mean the lack of a Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party is around, and sometimes it can be very effective electorally. I mean a real left against which the right formed all of its basic ideas. And I think that has had a big part of this. The second part of it, I think, is what you're talking about with Trump, although I see him as a symptom. And here we get into something that, there's a weird irony. So part of why Trump seemed illegitimate from day one, I don't think was just about Russia. I think it was also the racial dog whistling. I mean, more than dog whistling, the racial, the
whistling.
Really hardcore, nasty, racist commentary. I mean, some of the weakest moments for Trump have been Charlottesville and this NFL thing. It has not increased his base. And I think that sense of illegitimacy, that stain of illegitimacy about him, which I don't think is predominantly necessary from Russia, the Russia thing, I think it was because he kind of broke a code that you weren't supposed to break. And I think that has made him weak in many, many ways, and has made it easier for the Democrats to hold together and not to give an inch to him on these other things. It's kind of astounding that not a single Democrat broke on Obamacare. And I don't want to make predictions. I wouldn't be surprised if not a single Democrat breaks on the tax cuts. In the Senate, at least. I don't know as much about the House.
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems to be the key, right? It's like it's just what those two or three do. I mean, when we look back on those, back during the Bush years, there was like a half a dozen people to a dozen people in the Senate where you'd be like, they're going to defect.
Bush got, I think the votes for the tax cuts, he got like 58 votes. There were 49 Republicans because Jeffords had jumped by that point. Yeah. So that tells you something.
Yep.
Those, it doesn't exist anymore. But again, it's not just Trump that does this. It's the GOP. Like he is now the GOP.
Right.
That's and what's interesting, and here's for me is the true irony is he was the best they could do. So this colossal, spectacular failure we're seeing, right? This guy who's not been able to deliver on some of the most basic promises, not all of them, obviously, but some of them, that was the bet. Like that put them over the top. Because then we come back to that wild, chaotic style of his, right? That's what energized people at the base and got them excited, And without that, Jeb Bush, he would have been clobbered.
Right.
Rubio, all those guys would have been destroyed, I think, in a general election.
I agree with that. Well, I guess I'm just a little bit nervous for saying so far he's a failure. Let's hope that maintains at least for a while.
Yeah, and I try to be careful in the book about making predictions because they often turn out to be wrong. I thought he was going to lose the election. He won the election.
Yes.
But I think if you look at, what I think you can confidently say is, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of his election. And if you look back and compare him to almost virtually any other modern president, he has been by far the weakest president. There was just an article the other day, yesterday, I don't know if it was the Financial Times or somewhere, saying, this is a president who has issued more executive orders since anybody at this point, since in 50 years. That is not a sign of strength.
Right.
that is a sign of weakness. Barack Obama wound up issuing executive orders, especially in his second term, because he had no more control over Congress.
Yep.
But Congress was not. It was in the hands of the opposition.
That's right.
You know, at that point, Trump's Congress is in the hands of his own party, and he's forced this route of executive orders. Again, that is a sign of a very weak president.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens to the dynamic if the Democrats can take back one or both. You know, I don't know if there's a chance really for both, but even if one, it'll be fascinating. The book is The Reactionary Mind: Conservatism from Edmund Burke to Donald Trump. This is the second edition, which has been updated with Donald Trump. Who knows? You may have to write a third one.
No,
very,
I'm done
very
after
short.
This. This is it for me.
Did you really think you'd be writing that second one?
No.
6 months
No.
out, a year out? So, but Corey Robin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Welcome back. Michael Brooks here. That was Corey Robin, of course. We're going to go to the fun half where we will take your call, 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. The IMs are open. Become a member of the Majority Report today. That's how this show happens. You become our collective bosses. Majority.fm/become a member. Subscribe to the show on iTunes. Check us out on YouTube. Tonight, live, 7 p.m., Michael Brooks Show. Hope you'll check it out. If you're going to use Amazon, there's some type of link business that might be useful for you that helps this show out. JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade, coffee, tea, chocolate. Try the Majority Report blend. You know all this good stuff. Tomorrow, there's no public show. It's just members only. Only dessert.
Sorry, freebies.
Sorry. But, you know, in a certain sense, it's your choice.
You probably just have to listen to this because you don't want to pay for what's going on tomorrow, so you're listening to today's show.
You're just listening to it again. You're just going over it again. Again and again. Into the abyss. I mean, especially with this, because if you email and you need help, which we all obviously have needed, most of us have needed in our lives, you could get a freebie membership. But if you can do it, please do become a member of the Majority Report. See you on the fun half.
All the time, she said no, 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 like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 and I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 things are looking bad. She said no, 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 and if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say.
course I'm ready. Just bantering in the fun in the break about Nation of Islam Obama's condolence calls.
In the fun break.
In the fun break. So there was a caller who maybe got some good material there if they were waiting on the line. You're calling from an 847 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Dude, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Nation of Islam Obama.
Calling up fallen soldiers' families and comparing Al Qaeda members to the 70s Knicks. That's pretty good. It's definitely a preview of tonight. Is this Josh from Chicago?
Josh from Chicago.
Hey, Josh, what's on your mind, man?
Sorry, I don't have my Sam impression today.
It's okay.
The Nation of Islam Obama threw me.
It's all good, man. What's your thought?
So two things. First, so actually, I was just in England recently, and
how's that boy doing?
Free help. I was promoting a movie.
Nice.
I'm a big movie star.
Okay.
But I was able to get NHS care because I had something wrong with my ear. I was able to walk into an NHS health clinic even without an NHS card and get seen in like 20 minutes, which is actually quicker than CityMD.
Wow, it sounds terrible. Sounds like exactly the type of encroachment in freedom that we would never want here.
Never.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to you about the executive orders that Trump just did with Obamacare.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, I know a lot of people are like really happy that this repeal didn't go through. But I think what people need to understand is that Trump can still do what they wanted to do with the repeal and replace just by degrading Obama through these executive orders.
Well,
if he actually is able to do them. And to be like wary and like keep calling their senators or, and also keep putting pressure because they're going to degrade Obamacare even if they don't repeal it.
Yeah, no doubt. We had Wendell Potter on yesterday to talk about this. Adam Gaffney has a piece in the Jacobin which is slightly more optimistic about this. But, yeah, I mean, he's been threatening to do this since the beginning. Clearly, I bet Bannon was agitating for this out of the gate. And, look, there are 3 points to position now. One is you're absolutely right. We need to keep in every way possible agitating to preserve the protections that were created out of the ACA. That's vital. And we need to bludgeon Republicans and we need to bludgeon Trump with this. And hopefully, lead to a real strategy in 2018, which is obviously much more significant than speculating about presidential runs. And then the second thing, though, is, and this is not like a point to score. Actually, Josh, I'm going to let you go, okay, because there's a lot of noise in the background, but I'll keep going. Thanks, man. This is not about scoring some, fucking Twitter point. But the reality is that the ACA, because it was so clever and because it was so third way and because it had all of this complexity to it, there's a lot of different, it's like a Jenga set. There's so many different sort of pillars that you can undermine and knock out because it wasn't a full frontal assault on the basic reality of the problem with the American healthcare system, which is that it's privatized. And private health insurance company, if Apple profited off of charging you for an iPhone that it didn't actually ever give you, imagine that business model. It's fundamentally not going to work. And they restrained it and they put real regulations in it, but it's always, as long as there's private insurance dominating the market, your ability to access quality and reliable coverage is already more expensive than it should be in any circumstances and always under threat. So, and this is how these people think. They think structurally and strategically. And if there was ever a lesson to not just think on sort of carving out the margins of a playing field somebody else has created, it would be this. And, the Medicaid expansion, again, is, as far as the health coverage, that's obviously the most successful part. And that's purely an expansion of a successful government program. Let's look at President Trump, Donald Trump. This is yesterday, I believe, or was this yesterday or this morning? This was yesterday. He was at a cabinet meeting, and in his usual coherent brain state, he's going to explain two interesting contradictory ideas about Obamacare. Let's check out Trump in action.
In my opinion, what's happening is as we meet, Republicans are meeting with Democrats because of what I did with the CSRs, because I cut off the gravy train. If I didn't cut the CSRs, they wouldn't be meeting. They'd be having lunch and enjoying themselves, all right? They're right now having emergency meetings to get a short-term fix of health care, where premiums don't have to double and triple every year like they've been doing under Obamacare, because Obamacare is finished. It's dead. It's gone. It's no longer, you shouldn't even mention, it's gone. There is no such thing as Obamacare anymore. It is and I said this years ago, it's a concept that couldn't have worked. In its best days, it couldn't have worked.
Well, it's still causing a lot of problems, though, apparently. So it doesn't exist, but the Congress still needs to work together to deal with the crisis that he just created with it. He's a quarter right. The only way, or Obamacare was actually working to some fairly significant degree, and obviously the results are in terms of expanded coverage, expanded protections, lower medical bankruptcies, and other vital accomplishments of Obamacare. But the real way that Obamacare could have worked in terms of the kind of multi-structured system it put in place, multi-tiered system, would be with a public option there to drive those prices down. Now, were premiums going up because of Obamacare? No. Those companies wanted to raise premiums regardless. They were planning on doing it, and they blamed Obamacare for it. And one company, I believe it was Aetna, was basically pretty upfront about threatening to raise premiums if the Obama administration didn't let them go forward with a merger. So beware of that blame. But that's also classic Trump. I mean, he's even with this, and Lindsey Graham tried to adopt these talking points in his town hall with Bernie and Klobuchar and Cassidy a couple weeks ago. There is this kind of fake pseudo-populism that Trump still pushes. He's framing an assault on working class people having access to health plans as a populist move against the insurance industry gravy train. So even in all of his stupidity and incoherence, he does know how to sell that talking point. All right, you're calling from a 330 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Is this Mr. Samuel Seder?
No.
My name is Rom Livingston. I'm a partner with the firm of Livingston, Crosby, and Cromwell. We've been hired on behalf of a Mr. James Dorr to speak with Mr. Seder about some comments he made yesterday.
I would imagine that
particular,
yes.
In particular, Mr. Seder, is his name Samuel or Shamuel?
It's Shamuel.
We're a little vague about
It's
this.
Shamuel Seder.
Okay.
Yep.
Because Mr. Seder referred to our client, who, frankly, I've never met, but have been assured is a very nice young man, as a, quote, brainless idiot, close quote.
Did he actually say that yesterday? Jesus.
I understand. I understand Mr. Seder is either a lawyer or kind of pretends to be one.
Very much
true?
the latter.
Took some classes.
Very much the latter. Yes, I like the kind of pretends to be one, hitting it on the nose.
Because Mr. Seder would know then that there are two types of slander. There's slander per se, where you allege that someone has committed a crime.
Hey, wait, hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. I believe this is Richard from Ohio. Why are you on the phone trying to specifically instigate a legal action against the proprietor of this show? That's some deep cover shit there, man. It's impressive.
Thank you. But I would like to point out that
He says thank you.
Mr. Seder did not, in fact, accuse Mr. Dorr of a crime because being a brainless idiot is not, in fact, illegal in the state. But if you could have Mr. Seder call us, I will point out that I noticed another one of your employees, a Mr. Matthew Lek, is that short for Lekowski?
Yes.
Leskovitz?
Yep.
Or I'm not
no,
sure
it's
what,
not Leskovitz, believe it or not. He's the only non-Jew here.
Besides
Patrick O'Malley, who's a recent addition.
he called for the roasting of infants, if I understand correctly. He didn't say anything about consumption of the same, so we're not accusing him of cannibalism.
Yeah, Matt's very disturbed.
For a baby.
All right, do you have one more note you want to hit? Because we got to run.
That baby roasting comment was pretty darn disturbing. Let me tell you that right now. I got something else. I gotta jump.
I gotta jump.
I gotta
jump. Thank you. Thanks, boss. I don't know. Maybe I should let him get his last line in. It's just so tempting. You're calling from a 517 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh, this is Matt from the Jackson area of Michigan.
Hey, Matt.
I was just sorry, hang on. Sorry, 1 second. Get away from these people.
Yeah, get away from them. You should be consorting with better people, man.
Yeah, I was in a loud area. I was just curious. There's a lot of I sent you guys an email. There's a lot of organizing action right now about possibly getting an AM station or an FM station going, like a little community thing. What would you guys say would the best way to try to attack that? Like individual podcasts and then try to move them onto the air, or just any kind of strategy help would be helpful.
Are you talking about? Wait, you mean like locally, like where you live?
Yeah, locally where I live.
Oh, are you the Matt who asked me if you could run my show on the station that you're putting together?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think it depends how much resources you guys have, but I would really think about balancing it as best you could, because I think radio's very hard. And honestly, I don't really know much about the radio business. I've only been in this business. But my instinct would be that if anything was going to make me turn on like a community radio station, I would be really interested in hearing from the community. So I think that to the extent it's possible, like you should get on the radio. You should be talking. You know what I mean?
Our goals are basically to have like 3 or 4 different local shows a day.
Yeah.
But I mean, just in terms of being able to fill it out, like especially in the evening, and like in the midday, like I'd honestly like to have you guys on a midday, but obviously the FCC would not be fond of that.
Because of the profanity.
Like running just running Hartman in the middle of the day, and then like you guys at night or something. But still, either way, we just need stuff to fill.
Well, I mean, I told you before, you could definitely run my show. I'm cool with that. I think some mix makes sense to me. I really don't know much beyond that, to be completely honest with you, man.
I just know oh, he can't hear me.
Either way.
Can you hear Matt now? He has an idea.
So
I can hear him now.
I produce another show called the Tarfu Report that broadcasts.
I listen to that show too. It's fantastic.
So that's on WFMU and Michael's hitting drop. Sorry. And they have a similar, it's like a free-form radio type of thing, and they basically just want podcasts to fill it. That's why they used us. But to be honest, Sam might know the actual economics of, like, starting one seems like an uphill battle.
Well,
but
I mean,
very interested.
When you guys have community, do you have access to like a college station or something like that? Like if you have,
that's the issue. This Jackson is like a very like progressive little city in just the middle of just absolute backward caveman shit. So honestly, that's the issue. There is no, like, the community college is like almost a for-profit university at this point.
I see. The only place that I know in Northampton, Massachusetts, they put together some type of community station, but that's definitely the type of community that I don't even know what happened to it, but that is a place where you could probably put together a little bit of, change and get a low rent studio. They did that. And then every other model that I've known like that has been some type of basically community, like a college that's super community oriented, and there's some type of relationship with students and local people that are into it. And
there is a community center that we could possibly run it out of.
That's where I would check out. That's where I would check out for sure.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing your show tonight. I'm a patron. So.
Oh, well, you hold on. You know, I always said Matt from Michigan is a great guy. I said it, and it's true. Thanks,
Michael.
brother.
You guys are okay. Bye.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man. All right.
That's awesome, though. I would.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea if you put it together. I think. I also just think like the idea, like to the extent that it's possible. Like now, there's a lot of good shows, a lot of good podcasts coming out. But another way that like I use iTunes, I love to go and find like a drive time talk show in a country I'm interested in. Like I used to listen to a talk show in Johannesburg. I used to listen to one in Ireland. Like you can just like use audio formats to drop into every place you're interested in the globe and get some type of sort of localized perspective. I think that has so much value, and especially the fact that that can be synchronized with the internet now, so that you can serve a community function, but potentially, I mean, whatever you're struggling with in your community is, I mean, certainly in Michigan will have ramifications for the rest of the Rust Belt as an example. It's a very cool thing.
I use France Culture podcasts.
Yeah,
they're basically like French NPR to augment French learning.
How's that going?
I've kind of fell off the horse this summer, but I need to get back on it this fall.
I'm so ashamed of myself for only knowing English. I totally forgot all the Turkish I knew.
Duolingo and do some podcasts. That's what you need.
It's a good idea.
You should come to Español para Socialistas this weekend.
That is something I literally don't know if I can do this weekend, but like I will do. That's an awesome idea.
I think so. It's a DSA thing. I've been enjoying it. It's mostly for intermediate level Spanish speakers.
All right, I shouldn't be there then.
I am, but there are all different levels, and like the better students help the. I don't want to say better. The more
they're better.
The more
they're better.
The
superior students.
Help the
students who do better, the students who are smart, help the students that are dumb, and in a certain sense, that's very nice.
And it's with the goal of using your Spanish to work on projects like the Immigration Justice Working Group.
That's awesome. That's very Paulo Freire, like using education as like a tool of radicalization. I dig it. So John McCain, we're not even going to play it because fuck John McCain. Oh, there's a little bit of the preamble in it. So John McCain, who even, okay, look. You got to give him credit for killing these grotesque healthcare assaults, okay? But even then, he doesn't deserve a fraction of the credit that Susan Collins deserves. And even then, Susan Collins is actually still pretty horrible. But John McCain, whose whole career is predicated on warmongering and dull Sunday morning talk show posturing, who also was a major thread in the rise of Trumpism and what the Republican Party is by selecting Sarah Palin as vice president. He's doing his kind of like lap here to ensure that even though he sold out on any number of issues, even though he's wrong about every kind of major foreign policy decision we've ever dealt with, how mostly he's just a kind of standard issue corporate right-wing Republican who clearly is less personally comfortable with overt racism, I guess to his credit, in today's context than many other Republicans, although that's not really that distinguishing. He's doing his lap to make sure that this sort of maverick image is how he's remembered. And, when he retires, and I do, of course, he's dealing with a very serious health challenge. Hopefully he'll, have more time with us. But when he retires or when he passes away, you know that every mediocre Beltway moron is going to do some version of gotta admit, John McCain was a man of integrity and physical courage. To which I would say maybe he's a man of physical courage in the 60s, although I do not respect what he was doing in Vietnam at all. But is certainly not a guy of political courage. He's actually a guy of extraordinary grandstanding and expediency. And he spent some time in Philadelphia on Monday taking basically a pretty gentle, benign, indirect shot at Breitbart, which, of course, the usual denizens of mediocrity in this country have overinterpreted as a full frontal assault on Donald Trump and everything that Trump is doing. We're going to play a second of that. And then a guy who does make John McCain look like pretty much the best the human race has to offer is going to respond to that. Sepp Gorka.
Is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma.
All right. Here to react is former Deputy Assistant for President Trump.
That just to be clear, I mean, maybe they'll elaborate it, but he's talking about this guy. He called it, I think, a spurious nationalism or something to that effect. He's knocking Breitbartism. Go ahead.
Assistant for President Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, what do you think about that?
Very disappointing. You can be a hero, but you can also know what you're not. You can also not know what you're talking about. John McCain hasn't seen a war he didn't like in the last 20 years, and that's not who the president is. The president believes that it's America first, and the idea that you just criticize him from the sidelines.
John McCain is in the sidelines in the most powerful legislative body in the United States. What a fucking loser. John McCain didn't get a fake PhD from a diploma mill, as an example. Steve said that you can be courageous but still be foolish. John McCain will never be as cool as Trump or Steve. They're the coolest guys ever. There's a serious point to make here, though, because there are people on the deep dum-dum left that were upset that Steve Bannon was edged out because he was a quote-unquote anti-war voice. And I have to say, that is a sort of just a beyond embarrassing level of stupidity to even articulate an idea like that publicly. It's embarrassing to hear it, let alone the fact that anybody was actually saying it. But when these people are like quote-unquote anti-war, they sort of vaguely mean at some point that they were cool with Assad and Russia committing war crimes in Syria. Which, if you're properly anti-war, you oppose the Gulf, the United States, Iran, Russia, and Assad committing war crimes in Syria. Being sort of cool with Russian war on terrorism, carpet bombing, does not a anti-war activist make. Sebastian Gorka still, however, I would say his ideas about Islam are basically the same as Sam Harris's, but he actually does have more area background than Sam Harris. All right. I'm ready to receive your tweets. I'm sure that I've distorted him. That's another thing. At least guys like Gorka and Bannon don't say, like, you distorted me and took me out of context. They're like, yeah, what? Fucking Joe. Yeah.
Also, does race war count as war?
The idea that Gorka...
May I inquire about your ethnic background? It strikes me as a very tribal question, if you know what I'm saying.
Like, there are definitely wars Gorka wants to fight that John McCain doesn't want to fight.
Yeah.
Specifically, like, against the Jews.
John McCain is, when it's all said and done, you can support all these wars you want, but when we're actually taking on the Hispanic race, where's John gonna be? Probably getting an interview with Terry Gross about the lost standards of civility. I mean, it's just facile. Jamie, what rate do you tip a waiter at?
20% every single time.
Very deep cover. I think I still know where you come from. Matt is a true traitor to his race. Proper white man in this group of elitists and immigrants and usuries.
Globalists.
Matt comes from the real America, but yet traded. Matt, that's true. When this actually happens, you're going to be like the ANC regime was like particularly freaked out by people like Ronnie Casseroles because they were white. Like they were Jews, so they weren't like that good, but they were like still white. So they were like, what the fuck is your problem? So when this all goes down, like, they're going to have a problem with all of us that are white, but like, they're going to do like, oh, you got some Jew shit going on. You're from like a gay part of the country. Like, okay, but you're from Dakota, dude. You're from like the real America. Like you should be like standing next to Steve Bannon and be like, yeah, man. When he's just like, he's like, we're gonna get ready to do the tariffs. We're gonna do that too. Chinaman's not gonna sell stuff to us no more. Hide your camp. I do that bloviating Steve Bannon voice because I would like to remind everybody that Steve Bannon's intellect is mind-blowingly overrated and he's disgusting. And also it gets me warmed up to do another bloviating drunk voice. Bill O'Reilly. So apparently this, it's not given to me, at least as far as I can see, what date this actually came out in. Oh, this is from his home studio in July. Somehow we missed this, but now that we have Seamus O'Finnegan on staff with his brilliant, I'm sorry, Brendan. Yeah, his deep Irish understanding of O'Reillyism, he was able to flag this. So Bill O'Reilly, the thing that's tragic about Bill O'Reilly is that he does not, if you listen to someone like Bill Simmons, there's some element of like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Like, I have this really loyal audience, and they followed me off of ESPN. I don't have to deal with the suits anymore, and I have more freedom, and I'm still making a good living. This is pretty cool. Bill O'Reilly is totally like, I still do a show, so I don't just sit in front of the high school and bother girls all day. But I'm not on TV anymore, and that sucks. My life is over. So there's a lot of pathos here. And basically, this was from a time in the summer in July when junior trust fund baby real estate slumlord Jared Kushner was called to testify about his Russia connections. And Bill O'Reilly was describing Jared Kushner and why he thinks Jared Kushner is innocent in some incredibly, I think fairly inadvertently condescending ways, which are pretty funny. But basically, the reason that Brendan pulled this is because Bill O'Reilly is really drunk.
Jared Kushner. Now, is this the high school prom king or not? He gets out there. He looks like he's 17 years old, 18. All right? He goes into the Senate Intelligence Committee. He answers their questions about colluding with the Russians during the presidential campaign. Because I says, I didn't do anything. Did I believe him? There's no reason not to believe him. He just put it this way. If you were Putin and you wanted to undermine the American election, is Jared Kushner where you're going? I mean, I don't think so. Now, Paul Manafort, excuse me, there, you got some questions. So anyway, Kushner goes into the Senate Intelligence Committee. Not under oath, but if you lie to Congress, it's a crime. So he can't lie. And he says, look, I don't have anything to do with colluding with anybody. I was at that dopey meeting with Donald Trump Jr. It was boring. Nothing happened. He asked me to go into the meeting, and I said, all right, like anybody would, but I didn't do anything. So I can almost guarantee you, and this is very bad news for CNN and MSNBC. Doesn't matter, they're going to run wild with it tonight anyway, but I can almost guarantee you that Jared Kushner did not collude with anybody to do anything.
Jared Kushner. So you're Vladimir Putin, okay, folks? You want to align America, and you're going to go to this kid's bar mitzvah? You see Jared Kushner. I'm not going to go to shul to undermine the United States, if you know what I'm saying. It's actually interesting because there are contradictory reads on, my impression of Jared Kushner is that, yes, like his dad bribed his way into Harvard, basically. He seems like a very mediocre, coddled person. But he does show up to the extent that there's realness to any of this Russia stuff, he does show up in all of it. But I actually agree with Bill O'Reilly's basic premise. Like, Paul Manafort is a real guy. Like, Paul Manafort has seen some shit. And almost certainly done some shit. And, Jared Kushner's whole life was just like sandwiched in between like prep schools and his dad's jail cell. And other sort of watering holes.
The tenor Andrea Bocelli.
Bocelli.
If you're a Trump supporter, you're a bad person.
It's true. I don't know. What do you guys think? You think do you buy the Kushner defense? The guy, look at Putin's got some overgrown Jew kid for collusion.
I think that and I like you don't like to overplay the Russia thing, but I think it's almost certain that Kushner had a very inappropriate meeting or two with people he shouldn't have.
And some type of email. I mean, I think the thing when if you start to realize that in the material read of this that nobody wants to have, which is there's a lot of oligarchic, let's use that neutralish word, Russian money in the New York real estate market that would make someone like Jared Kushner associating with Russian figures that might, as an example, be involved in organized crime
or adoption.
It was about adoption and Obama. It's not really shocking that Gerald would have those connections. Yes.
He kind of hides behind that Ken doll veneer in the same way that Ivanka does, I think. Oh, no, that guy, he would never do a thing like that. He seems incapable.
You think I look like a Ken doll? Thank you.
Yeah,
they always called me Down syndrome Forrest Gump.
They definitely got they're like adult kids still. That adult kid thing going on.
That is totally their angle.
He also kind of complimented him in a weird way. Everyone wants to fuck the prom king.
I can't tell, though, whether Bill O'Reilly was saying, he looks like the prom king. Not. Or if he was really saying it. I feel like Bill O'Reilly
he's young and innocent.
Yeah.
But that's weird that Bill O'Reilly's mind goes to prom king with that.
Yeah, Bill O'Reilly should have been like, it looks like the kid that we dunked in the toilet with the prom king.
He looks like a hot, sexy teenager.
Now, I'm not gay. If I was, I would give it to Jared Kushner. And give, not receive, which is different. Wow. These segments really get out of control when I don't have producers. Speaking of out of control, I am happy to announce Anthony Scaramucci followed me on Twitter the other day. Haven't followed him back yet. He's very promiscuous with that follow. He follows 100,000 people. So, I mean, Anthony Scaramucci, for a week was, the funniest person in the world, and then it kind of hit that point where it was all right, dude, what can I, because you do, I still think the best routine was hair and makeup with Sarah Huckabee. It was just I don't know, whatever, whatever the fucking Liberace was that did her hair and makeup, keep it going. You made that -10 a 4.5, that guy's a fucking genius. So, Anthony Scaramucci went away, and of course, I love how nothing in today's world, there's no that person went away for a year or 2 or 3. It's all it's just weeks. He got fired, he went away for 3 days. The story was his kid was being born, and he was at a Trump rally instead, which is awesome. And then he went on the late night shows, and he was like, Steven, I want to be very fucking clear. I don't support the racism. Donald Trump, he's a great fucking guy. But Bannon, I think he said some very, very bad things about the Mulanyangs and others. And I opposed that. So now he has returned with a new media venture. And he got in trouble a couple weeks ago. We actually didn't catch this, but to promote the Scaramucci Post, which is it's going to be about stories that are fucking positive. He did a poll a couple weeks ago, which I think was basically do you like socialism poll? And of course, that just went wildfire. It was everybody. I bet the only people voting no, I bet the only people voting no on the Scaramucci is socialism good poll was a handful of Trump chuds who followed the post, And then, like, probably some, like, Verret people who were like, well, you know what, Anthony Scaramucci, I don't support what you did, but you condemned racism, and this is and Bernie Sanders is ruining everything. So I will note my resistance by voting no on the Scaramucci post poll. So that was kind of stupid, and it was tone deaf, and they didn't get the results they wanted. And they have been thinking in a slightly more provocative direction. And remember how Scaramucci said that he wasn't into the whole, like, kind of like racism, maybe potentially anti-Semitism thing. Maybe even theoretically the misogyny and the homophobia and the transphobia. Maybe he was just one of those, like, I'm a fucking economic nationalist. I
Serving my country
fucking
over
trying to help
here.
my fucking country. Look, you want to be a fucking fag. You want to be a fucking Mexican. You fucking do you. I'm an open-minded fucking person. I don't deny the Holocaust, but I do ask questions. Poll questions specifically. And here it is. Now we have it up on screen. The Scaramucci Post tweeted this out. How many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? Less than 1 million. Between 1 and 2 million. Between 3 and 4 million. More than 5 million. Well, I really like, you could see the kind of polls here of the modern American battle. Because clustered in the middle were like a group of 4% who were like, I think the Holocaust was a tragic event that somehow I slept through, like, you know, any kind of introductory, like World War II class in college. I think 1 to 2 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. 7% were like, whoa. It was 2 to 3 million. And then 20% say less than 1 million. I'm going to guess that an
Is
overlap...
it 0 less than 1 million?
is more than 0, but not all an option. Is Hitler never got to finish his work in the option list? And 20% said, and 69 said 5 million or more. Now, 5 million is not the ground floor number. I believe it is 6 million. So it's interesting that even in the highest ballpark, Scaramucci, you know that somebody like an intern went, I was like, I think it was actually 6 million. He's like, whoa, how many I see fucking Jews in the Diamond District every day. 6 million of them? How many of these fucking people are there? They're running Israel. They're writing up my fucking contracts. My fucking wife's got one of them hounding my ass. I might not even be able to start the fucking Post. And you're telling me that 6 million was the ground floor? Get the fuck out of here.
Would this poll be less anti-Semitic if one of the options was like 100 million?
No. You know, it's just, I think this is also, this does relate to this, like I'm surprised that Google doofus has not retweeted this yet. You know, like why can't you can't have an honest conversation?
Technically, 6 million is more than 5 million.
Yeah, first
so
of all,
it's
technically
included.
6 is more than 5. And number 2, if we can't have an honest debate about the numbers, then how can we honestly address anti-Semitism? Yeah. Yeah, what about Roma and gay people? Yeah, so good luck to your future ventures. Please, seriously, keep putting out polls, like, for real.
It's like being gay in the 1950s.
Oh, I'm sorry. I literally thought that was the background noise of James. I thought that was James Damore. You're calling from a 215 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Yeah, hello, Michael?
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, what's going
on? You caught me a little bit out of character.
Okay, man.
Allow me to fall into my Jefferson Beauregard secession, and I need to send out a shout-out to my people, which may be in code.
Okay.
So, to all the landed gentry, I need you to understand that the tax break that Mr. President Trump, that is trying to promote is, let's just say, restoring our greatness.
I think the
the
message is heard loud and clear. I think you're exactly right, Mr. Sessions. Thank you for the call. That is the truth. Economics is Republican economics is obviously structural classism. It's also white supremacy. You're calling from a 916 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Dave, cool with the nationalism, okay? We're trying to promote oligarchs, okay?
Is this Steve Mnuchin?
No, actually, it's Nico. Sorry, guys.
Hey, what's up, Nico? What's going on?
Actually, every time I am, you frequently call me Nick, so I think I'm going to go by Nick. Hi, Patrick.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. I had a quick question about a discussion, Michael, you had a few weeks ago when you were hosting.
Yes.
You were talking about police and how they are workers.
Right.
And so I brought this topic up with several other people from DSA.
Right.
And they were telling me how well yes, that is a point that they are workers and that
right.
no one would disagree with
But
that.
they're also
However,
instruments of state oppression.
Exactly. Also,
right. See, I know exactly where you're going.
Some people mentioned that they were considered class traitors as well, but I don't know if that's helpful rhetoric in today's political climate. I was just thinking what you all might think.
I mean, well, let me just say really quick personally. So as an example, there's a great dude who listens to and calls into this show who's a cop who has amazing politics and is trying, in his context, reverse reactionary politics, right? So I kind of think on some level I'm sort of wherever there's an opportunity of solidarity and supporting somebody doing that kind of work, I want to support them, even at the very least rhetorically. Now, I think structurally there's very legitimate questions to be asked that yes, are cops deployed in a lot of different contexts to disrupt labor organizers, to beat the shit out of Occupy kids. I mean, that's even separate from the kind of broader, racism and classism and police violence issues, right? So it's a legitimate critique, and there is a trend you can see where it's we're going to have this very punitive, authoritarian neoliberal state because as this austerity increases, you're going to have more state violence to basically manage it. And you're basically doing a trade-off with one very specific group of workers, which, to be honest with you, I don't know how long that's going to last either, because I think that you're going to see much more privatized security forces and things like that. And I think that if you look even in other places where people like the Kochs want to take us in some respects.
Tiger Swan,
and you look at, places. I mean, I always use the example of, and Manuel Castells reported this. He's a very prominent academic in Cali, in Colombia. The Cali cartel partnered with paramilitaries and the police, and they would do quote unquote social cleansing raids and kill homeless people and prostitutes and gay people, and they would hang signs that said "Clean Cali, Beautiful Cali." And I think that's the logic of a gated. Anyways, I'm getting off, but the point I'm making is that I think it's a legit. But the third thing I would say is yes. Rhetorically, I really there's one thing when we say on the left, there's an uncomfortable critique that we might need to make or at least seriously debate because there's serious policy and cultural and philosophical and economic implications of. That's one thing. So we might need to have a real rigorous conversation about work and policing and everything else, okay? But but back to the first point. One, it undermines people who are in those. There are people in those contexts. There are police who see themselves as workers. There are police who see themselves as community servants, and they're trying. And that's a real thing. I'm not just saying that to be PC. So that's one part of it. But the second part of it is dude, that kind of fucking police rhetoric. It just sounds like 60s, 70s, warmed over. It's not smart politics. So I am totally all on board for. Maybe this isn't smart politics, but we have to deal with it because it's a real thing and we need to talk about it. But I'm not on board for let's do rhetorical bullshit because it makes us sound better and posture more on social media, but undermines leftist positioning. That's fucking stupid. And I don't like that.
I think it's hard. I don't like dogmatically sticking to political theory. I think there is a place for having a discussion about how some cops do join the workforce because of legitimate economic solid jobs. However, on the other hand, when you see cops being increasingly militarized, and you see in one instance you see the cops shouting, "Whose streets? Our streets." I mean, when you see that happening, it creates a giant division between workers who are fighting for socialist economic change and between the police who are enforcing a capitalist system.
I agree with that completely.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we should alienate police officers.
But that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think that's a political misstep.
So I agree with you completely. I think the first point you're making, that's what I mean by the serious policy conversation, the serious strategy conversation that needs to happen. But the kind of like lazy, and they could be fun, but it's like if we're out as a broad-based movement to actually win and persuade quote-unquote normies or whatever the fuck, coming out and using like demonizing police rhetoric is just not the right rhetorical strategy. It alienates potential allies, and it makes us look weird and out of step. And then on the other hand, it might be that we need to have a real conversation about the substantive issues of like, where do police actually fit if they're instruments of repression and control of austerity? That's real, but that's not rhetorical bullshit that demonizes individuals and is lazy. It's not like, there used to be a radio show called Bad Cop No Donut, and it was all like chronicling police abuse. And like, in some ways it was like a super immature, like it was no context, right? It was just like a chronicle of police misdeeds, and it was like everything from like things that reflected on systemic issues to like, okay, you could find a doctor who did, you know what I mean? Like you could find anybody who did something that was asshole-ish, right? But even if it was a more systemic show, like it's a funny title, but like serious, like that's the fucking title that you're going to use to try to get out and reverse, some really serious problems. And I just think like, it's embarrassing. It's stupid. It's unnecessary.
Absolutely agreed. Jill Stein, 2020. See you later, everyone.
Thanks, boss. Jill Stein. Not a single word about Jill Stein. All right, let's do this last piece of sound really quick. A couple weeks ago, Jim Baker, we played it. They were selling food buckets and singing "Staying Alive." And this is a follow-up. Is this also about the food bucket? I don't really have much of a description here. Sorry? Oh, okay. So, this helps contextualize it. So we made fun of Jim Baker, along with, I think, plenty of other people. And now Jim Baker is explaining what is in store for us.
Of people say, well, that prophecy didn't come true. I got 31 things from God.
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago now?
You got it in 1999. You delivered it 1999, New Year's Eve, going into 2000.
Mm-hmm. And
I keep a copy of it.
And the people almost fell out when I gave it.
Yeah.
They were overwhelmed when I gave it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, 9/11 was in this.
Right. It didn't seem possible.
And a year and a half it took before that happened.
That's right.
But here's the thing. Rick Joyner told me this, and listen to me, church, listen. When God says something to you, you don't always know the exact time it's going to happen. And stop beating up the prophets, because God says, woe unto you when you beat up on the prophets. God is speaking to his people. If you take time to read this book, you'd realize that everybody in this book talked with God. Even Satan and donkeys talk to God.
Goddamn right.
Right. That's right.
That's right.
The only ones that probably aren't talking to God these days are some mean people in America.
Mm.
And people who just are anti-Christ.
Mm.
If you don't want to hear it, just shut me off. Especially you folks that monitor me every day to try to destroy me. Just go away. You don't have to be there. You don't have to hear it. But one day you're going to shake your fist in God's face. And you're going to say, God, why didn't you warn me? And he's going to say, you sat there and you made fun of Jim Baker all those years. I warned you.
Let me say something. If God is such a dick that I'm getting judged on making fun of Jim Baker, then I take the punishment. Okay? I take the L. If God is, first of all, if God is such an asshole that theoretically, according to people like this, like Al Capone could be in heaven for like accepting Christ, but like Gandhi isn't, fuck that. And then number two, if you're taking a whole account of somebody's life and your main thing is you made fun of Jim Baker, you're going to hell, then I don't want a part of any system that you're running.
It's not just that you go to hell for not, like, even if you obey God and don't make fun of Jim Baker, the best you have to look forward to is surviving in a post-apocalyptic Earth with his fucking food buckets.
Yeah, exactly, with his buckets and Baker. And by the way, if the food buckets are all sufficient, stop asking for our money, you prick. And sorry to make everybody nauseous, but am I the only one who's reading a little bit of a sexual vibe between him and his co-host? I feel like she is quite convinced of his prophecy-making abilities. Maybe he has more talent at prophecy-making than we realize. Maybe those supplements work. All right, I'm sorry, guys. I can't get to all of these calls. I'm going to get as many as I can, but we have to run in a couple minutes. You're calling from a 267 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Michael?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Theodore Cuxtable calling in again. I called, but your discussion today was pretty relevant to an article I read in the Atlantic yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So it involves the whole Russia thing, and I don't want to get too tinfoil hatty here, but back in 2016, businessman by the name of Bill Browder gave testimony before, I think it was the Senate, and he was also involved in the creation of the Magnitsky Act, which stemmed from his business dealings. But the Atlantic has it has the full printout of his testimony, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing.
I'm sorry, your phone's really choppy. Is there any way you could just summarize it for me in a couple of seconds, man? Just let me know what your question is.
Yeah, I'll try back another day.
Oh, okay, appreciate it. Try back try it tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Yep.
You're calling from a 215 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, hi, Michael. It's Mindy. How are you?
Hello, Mindy. How are you?
I'm good.
Your phone's
I'm good.
ringing.
Yeah, I know. It's my husband. I don't feel like talking to him. I'm talking to you.
All right. Well, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to say is I'm having trouble understanding why I was calling this up, the House. I'm having trouble understanding why the Democrats are like not being outraged. Do you remember when Barack Obama did like all kinds of weird shit? I mean, when he did stuff, the Republicans went crazy and made a big deal. Why are we not
all
freaking
sorts
out?
of weird shit? Well, I think that partially.
I mean, I don't understand why. Okay, go on.
I think partially it's temperamental. I think that.
What work does freaking out do?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that I wanted to. Well, that could mean a lot of things. Could they be more aggressive? Could they be more strategic? Absolutely. But part of the problem is that Democrats have two pathologies that plague them. And one pathology is that they are also, many of them still compromised by corporate money and still relatively right-wing and kind of complacent. And then the other thing is that they still are obsessed with cliches and institutions that have been utterly discredited. So I think that, I think that they still view, they view winning on the margins and creating these little slice and dice approaches. And I think I bet you from a certain Democrat wonk nerd perspective, they're like, this is exactly where we want them. There's low approval ratings. They're taking away, they're fucking with health care. It's a total mess. And Democrats have there's only two ways that Democrats have won in the last couple of decades, Mindy. They either have an extraordinarily charismatic candidate, like generation-defining charisma, like an Obama or Bill Clinton specifically. That's it.
Or Kamala Harris.
I don't know about that, but that's another thing.
I like her.
She's fine. I don't know if she has that charisma level. But anyways, we can get to that later. But I'm talking even before she came on the scene.
No, I know.
They
win
win either with charisma or they win because Republicans fuck up so badly that they get the fallout. So they don't think the way we might think. Republicans are playing for the whole ball. They're trying to implement a decades-long strategy to codify and entrench limits on democracy, massive wealth redistribution to rich people, and stripping and destroying the social safety net and letting corporations get even more free reign over the country. And Democrats are thinking in cycle-to-cycle terms, how could we slice off a few more people according to some data analytic? And if you're looking at politics that way, you're less strategic and you're less aggressive.
I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
No, this thing yesterday with him saying Barack didn't call anybody when, if a Democrat would have, if it was the opposite, they would have been all over this. It would have been
George
the worst
Bush
thing in
never
the
called
world.
anybody. He would wait. In fact, in a certain sense, he would wait for days.
And I was looking. I heard him say it live, and I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? It was insanely, just so unbelievably. I couldn't get, and they're not even talking about it.
Well, I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think there's much use. I think that if there were Democrats, Al Franken does this sometimes, but I think the best response to type of things like that is not to freak out. I think the best response is just be like, yeah, he's a fucking idiot. And if Democrats actually had more of that, they would be more appealing to the public. My response is, oh, you're just upset again because Barack Obama is in every way your superior? Oh, that's cute. Anyways, we're going to go back to try to protect health care for people. Go fuck yourself.
Right, but do you think that maybe there's, I don't know, maybe I'm giving us too much credit, but do you think there's a butter, we're just trying to run the clock out?
Yes.
So he's so fucking crazy
yes.
in 218?
Yes. I think that's what a lot of them are doing.
What?
Yes, I think that's what a lot of them are
doing. Do you think that's what they're doing?
Yes.
And my last question, so you think maybe that's a possibility, that they're just trying to run the clock out?
Totally. I do.
Okay, and then the last thing is, why is MSNBC, I don't know if you can answer this.
I don't watch MSNBC. I'm being perfectly honest
okay.
with you. I really don't.
But I can answer.
Matt can answer.
Okay, can you answer, Matt? You know what I'm going to say. What am I going to say, Matt?
I actually don't know what you're going to say. Why is it trash?
They're leaning back. They're they're letting Casey Hunt interview Paul Ryan on her debut show on Sunday. They're letting Jennifer Rubin talk, and then David Fromm, and actually I think the most normal person that talks on that channel, and I hate to say this, is Stephen Schmidt. He's normal. Compared to some, you would have a show. I just don't know why they're going.
Because
with
MSNBC has a lot of, they still have some good programming, but they're also an extremely mediocre network. They're failing. No, I think it's because they're just, it's this whole resistance bullshit. It's everything. Look, not liking Donald Trump, I keep thinking of this Chris Rock routine, which is so inappropriate for white people to ever reference. But the point being that not liking Donald Trump and condemning being sexual assault and racism should not be something that gets you a cookie. This is the most bare minimum of any type of basic human decency and cognitive awareness. But that's the resistance lane. Everything that isn't Trump is great, and it's way more exciting. Of course, we won't want to talk about anybody who had a structural understanding of how we got to Trump. Way better to talk to some mediocre Republican hack who's supported every type of ghoulish foreign policy and predatory economics imaginable because they get that Trump is rude. And that's the programming, and that's the resistance, and that's, DC mediocrity. What can I tell you, Mindy? Welcome to my world.
I'm just really frustrated. I'm just really frustrated. I'm frustrated with 3 kids that are in their 20s, and I just think that the better days are behind us, and I'm just thinking that's just.
Well, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. We're doing our best, Mindy.
Work on it.
I will.
Work on it.
Yes.
Well, so that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you for calling, Mindy.
Really upset.
Oh.
All right, I'm going to listen to your show tonight.
Thank you. But until then, take a news fast.
Take a what?
Until my show tonight, take a news fast.
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
Wait, one last thing. Jerry Seinfeld stand-up, his new stand-up.
Yeah.
Any baby boomers out there, you got to be a baby boomer.
I would imagine so.
If you're a baby boomer, the first 20 minutes of Jerry Seinfeld thing is roll on the
So
floor.
if you're a baby
funny.
boomer, raisin jokes become funny.
Fuck you.
Thank you for the call. That was the best.
Don't let the world beat you down, Mindy.
Yeah, seriously, Mindy. Got to remember, it's actually
It might
great,
not crash, but
watch
we're
Jerry
all here
Seinfeld.
together.
Yeah, we're all here together. Guys, I'm really sorry. I can't get to any more calls. I apologize profusely. I'm here at 7 after, whatever. Call in again. And we're here tomorrow. I'll take more calls tomorrow, but we really got to run. Bo Ghetto, how long does it take? The soldiers were killed weeks ago. It takes a while, especially if you're Obama.
I sent a letter. I sent it on the weekend, though, so it might take an extra, 2 weeks to get there.
It takes a while.
Sometimes you put it in the mailbox on a Saturday, and it never shows up.
Never shows up. It's like the way I used to tell contractors at my hotel, checks in the mail.
I got to stop sending out my checks and my condolences on Saturdays.
Yeah, Saturdays. They really beat you down. Unionized AI. Hey, Omar, as someone who's pretty quote-unquote anarcho, as Sam put it yesterday, I think his point about not deriding state power generally is a good one. Anarchists should act strategically in their attempts to minimize and circumvent the state, and I think this is intuitive to most anarchists I know. We wouldn't seek to disrupt bingo night at a public senior center, even though it represents state power. It simply isn't particularly exploitative. The anarchist impulse is, of course, concerned with combating hierarchies of exploitation and empowering the agency of communities. Along the same line, I feel personally motivated to help the rush towards push towards universal health care, even if it's administered across by the state. Of course, because it will increase freedom, the kind of freedom you're interested in. Health care inequality is an utterly grotesque injustice. It binds workers to employees. Yeah, exactly. Often with no regards for the conditions of their labor, simply to erase that the worker maintains health care for themselves and their families. I'm sorry, I can't read all of this, but you're totally on point. Denver Dave. Regarding universal human nature, neoclassical economics presupposes the rational actor model. That presupposition is grounded in the standard that everybody acts in their own rational self-interest. Regarding science and skepticism, what your guest completely forgets to mention is scientific curiosity. Willful ignorance is not synonym for skepticism. Willful ignorance is cynicism. Sorry, I ignore my earlier comments. I didn't realize your guest is critiquing. Oh, okay. I cannot even read that. But I should read this. I don't believe Sam Ace of Base. Exactly. I know for a fact that they always used to play at the Boston Water Museum. No shit. Such fucking not. Look, if we all know Ace of Base is, Sam certainly heard Ace of Base. It's almost Clintonian. So, no, never heard it. Nope. Maybe I just went to different clubs. Epish. Post-war market capitalism has created an identity politics of the rich. Yes, that's beautiful. By the way, Robin has been making a big point on populism that runs a lot of what Pearlstein's been saying around populism into the ground.
I definitely think I prefer Coy Robin's take on Republicans over Pearlstein's, actually.
Yes, I agree. Emma Goldman Manifesto, Corey Robin analysis, striking in its ability to distill the strain of American ideology that it presents across many sectors. My thought is how easily his analysis can be extended to how Silicon Valley represents itself. Ilmec, please let Sam know that in a sea of Majority Report interviews, yours too, Michael, today's interview was top 5 of 2017, top 25 of all time. Great interview. Awesome. Chris Lepaco, it's my birthday today. Will you play this 60 video clip as my present? It makes me laugh. I can't really do that, Chris, because we don't play stuff off of this, but I'll play it tonight. And happy birthday, my brother. Joseph Ballin, R.I.P. John Doonesworthy, a.k.a. Jim Leahy. One of the saddest days of my life. I don't know who this is. Also, why haven't you all covered the Virginia general gubernatorial elections along with Virginia state delegates? You know these are elections and are big in 2017, right? You could have a point about that. Okay, and let me find, I'm sorry, definitely not getting to all these. I apologize. The final I am of the day. And this is recorded. Thames Darwin, read as Mooch. When you're talking about the number of Jews murdered, are you talking about all of them or just the ones that did deserve it? There's no public show tomorrow, but we will have something for you members. We're back here tomorrow at the usual time for a members-only show. I'll be at the helm with our amazing crew. And tonight, 7 p.m., Michael Brooks Show. Thanks, everybody.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and